a table set with all kinds of different styles and different ways of making bread. And the intention has been throughout the whole of our time together in the last few months to talk about and emphasize this idea about coming home. What does it mean to build family? What does it mean to feel like you are part of something bigger than yourself? And how do you recreate family in your home and in this church? And that's what we're going to be on about again this morning. I don't know how kind of different other cultures describe home. I think British people say, when you invite somebody into your home, often they'll say something like, please make yourself at home. But they don't mean it. Just saying, culturally, it's not true. So if they said, make yourself at home, and you said, I'd change the wallpaper, they don't mean it. Okay? So make yourself at home is British for, please be comfortable. I don't know what would South Africans say, Marlies? Who knows? Similarly, okay. I don't know what a Persian man might say, or a Persian family. I don't know what a Hong Konger would say. But the aim, no matter which culture you're from, is for the person that you've invited in to say to you, I feel at home here. That's the point. I feel at home here. And that's what we're after. That's what Jesus invites us into. Hospitality isn't just about entertaining, as it's possible to be entertaining without being hospitable. Hospital. Do you remember that word? Hospital. It's the same root word, and it's the art and practice of being hospitable. It's the reception and welcoming of friends. It's welcoming of visitors, and we'll look at that today, and welcoming of strangers, which will take us a few more weeks. We've got 6 weeks of inviting you around the table, and that's what we're going to look at. And at the end of July, we're aiming to really encourage cross kind of pollination of each of us so that we get to go from being in a meeting together to being in each other's homes together. And we're looking at how we might be able to facilitate that so that people who want to host and people who want to visit can find each other. And that's part of our plan through this series. Catherine and I, between us, have lived in a lot of homes in our lives, in different countries and in different nations. I've stayed in homes and ate countless meals around the world. However, the greatest hospitality I've ever received was from people who didn't have very much. They received me and my friends as though we were sent from God, some of these people. I remember a couple called Peter and Pile Vosu in Estonia welcomed us as though we were from the Lord. Allery and Katrin welcomed us from the Lord. They didn't have very much. It was really difficult days, but what they had, they gave. But what they had more than anything else was their hearts, and they gave us their hearts, and we gave them ours. I remember being in the middle of a floodplain where some houses had to be built in the middle of Burma. I was on a mission trip there, and in this particular mission trip, we were invited all of a sudden to walk to the edge of the village and go out about maybe half a mile. And we were in a house built on stilts, and we walked in, and these people had nothing. And they provided, however, a spread came from somewhere for lunch, and we were very grateful for it. And I said, how do these, to the guy who was kind of chauffeuring us and looking after us, he said, chaperoning us, he said, I said, how do they afford this? He said, this is their month's salary. You are highly honored guests, and this will be in their family history from now on. And they wanted to honor you, and they wanted to honor the legacy of the Lord in their lives. And it was like 2 pieces of bread and a bit of ham. We would have turned our noses up at it, but it cost them a month's wages. So there's something here for us to really get a hold of, I think, because hospitality is more than just having a few friends around. It's opening up your heart. And opening up your heart is a little bit trickier to do than just saying, come for a meal. But as you well know, meeting together and eating together is a very intimate type of thing. Now, if you just move us on, Maria, to the next slide. Old Testament hospitality was essential because there was not really that many inns or hostels or hotels. So actually, if you traveled in your job, it was a necessity of life to be offered hospitality. The traveler, the merchant, the itinerant prophet, the landless Levite, the relative seeing family, the needy, and the foreigner all found hospitality. And hospitality ensured that there would be water for the feet and decent food, and they were a measure of your character. It was a big deal. A lack of hospitality was a stain on the family and a stain on your people. I don't know if you saw it. There's a tragic earthquake in Afghanistan at the moment. And I saw yesterday on the news that there was some reporters who were just reporting what was going on. And some men were there. They'd lost everything, but they had about 20 to 30 peaches. This was all they had to eat. And these Afghan men would not let the reporters leave until they had taken a peach. And he said, no, you need it more than we do. He said, please, you honor us by taking it. And hospitality, it was a way of saying, I am still human despite the tragedy and the crisis that I'm facing. In the New Testament, just next slide, thanks. Jesus practiced hospitality and provided spiritual and material aid. Jesus hosted the 5,000. He was there at Emmaus. He hosted the Last Supper. He did fish on the beach. As a guest, he'd often teach his companions and his adversaries around the table. And here's the thought, isn't it? Is that when we come round a table, not dissimilar to this, what are our expectations? Have you ever had those kind of moments when you've been in people's lives and people's hearts and in people's homes where you just, it gets more than just being a friendly and a good-natured evening to, I think I'm encountering God. I remember sitting around a table in Edinburgh with my friend Rich Robinson and another guy called Alan and his wife and a couple of other people. And as the evening progressed, everybody kind of faded, if you like, because what I was hearing God speaking to me in the midst of this dinner. I think our faith could increase if we expected to meet God round the dinner table. He said, you meet God round the dinner table. Have you seen my toddler? Now, I understand that. I do get that. So sometimes it's still true that you can, but it's not always as quiet and reflective as perhaps you might want. But with kids or with friends round for dinner or whatever it might be, it is possible to break out of just a functional eating together to engaging with the living God together and breaking bread. When we break bread in this church, we do it, well, we've got these little kind of semi-skimmed things we're doing it from at the moment, or whatever it is. That's great. But really, the place to break bread is around the table at your home. It's a habit pattern to have communion with your own family. You break the bread, you drink the juice or whatever, and the presence of God is there in the midst of the people, of your family, round that very table. Why is this important? Because we haven't stopped being invited to the Lord's table every time that we sit down to eat. Every time, take bread and eat. Come and sit round the table. Hospitality today is simple. I don't know if you can see that was our house the other day when we had all the young adults around for a barbecue. It was a full night. There was not much room. But we had a great time. We issued the invitation. We extended the table into the garden. And we received our guests who are now our friends. We brought the food out and we talked about Jesus. If you want a template for what it's like to invite people into your home, do that. issue an invitation, extend the table, set out a few more places, receive your guest or whoever you've invited, bring the food out, and talk about Jesus. There's nothing better to talk about anyway, is there? He's so wonderful. He's so filling and so fulfilling to talk about. So, listen, issue the invitation. If I could just ask you to take one thing away from today, it would be that. Would you consider inviting somebody into your space, into your life, and offering hospitality? Some people won't say yes because they're afraid that they'll have to reciprocate, that they'll have to say, well, okay, well, if I invite you, then if you invite me, then I'll have to invite you, and I don't want, my house isn't very nice, and I don't cook very well, or I'm not very good at this. Look, it doesn't really matter about that. What really matters is your heart. And if your heart is open, then you could be invited for dinner in someone's place and have food, and the next time you could invite them for a coffee. It's just fine. The point isn't the food itself. The point is the fellowship across the table. Does that make sense? I'm probably preaching to the converted and speaking to the choir. It's basic stuff, but I think that if we've not been used to doing it in this culture, then actually you might not know how to do it, and we want to make it part of the way that we live together and work together. So I'd just like to point out a couple of little bits in the Bible where hospitality worked out a little bit different. So if you've got Bibles, would you turn to 1 Samuel chapter 21 and verses 1 to 9. In a recent development, I have to acknowledge this publicly, I bought a large print Bible. Yeah, thank you. And Adam too. It's an age thing. So the thing is, I can actually see it. I really can. So look at this and we'll start. I'll just tell you a little bit the story. King David. He's being chased out of town by King Saul, and Saul is basically threatened by David's success and the fact that God is with him. David goes to the tabernacle, to a particular town which is populated by priests. And verse 2, he answered Ahimelech the priest. The king sent me on a mission, said to me, no one is to know anything about the mission I'm sending you on. As for my men, I've told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have at hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find. The priest said, I don't have ordinary bread. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women. And on we go, and he gives him the bread. It's an interesting bit of hospitality. The problem with this type of hospitality in this instance is that David has gone to the place where the tabernacle, the presence of God, it's where worship took place, and it was populated by priests. And there were rules around that, and this bread was for the presence of God. It was bread of the presence, it was called showbread. And David's saying, I'm hungry now. I need this food. And so the priest says, you can have it. And David is on the run from a king that wants to kill him. And he goes to the tabernacle, to the place where God's presence is, and he takes the bread and ends up with a Goliath sword as well, just out of interest. The problem is that very act of generosity by this guy Ahimelech costs him his life. Costs him his life. His hospitality, his willingness to care was rebuked by the king. It was observed by a king's spy, and then he was killed for supporting an enemy. It's Refugee Week, Refugee Sunday. There are people in this country who are not well disposed to people from other countries. This city is regarded as a city of sanctuary, a city of refuge. That's the way the our city council have positioned themselves, and I applaud it. I'm for it. But what's interesting is that offering hospitality to the stranger and the outsider, to the foreigner, the alien, and the refugee can sometimes bring you into conflict with people who've been living here a long time. Politics is real, and people's perceptions, as twisted as they may be, in my opinion, do affect us. What are we to do? Well, hospitality costs. When someone invites you for what they can get from you, that's not hospitality, that's something else. And when you invite somebody for what they can give you, well, that's better, because you can be invited into their lives and you can invite them into yours. Giving space to a weary soul that's lost its way, or giving space to somebody who's lost and abandoned and a long way from home, seems to me to be very Christian. What do you think? The idea that somebody who's distanced and somebody who's not known and somebody who's a long way and has been through trauma and trial and is trying to make their way in the world, as our sister was saying earlier on, man, this is it's a hard graft. And they ran and they come because they had to come because they were being persecuted. And at that point, what are we to do as the people of God? Never mind what the politicians are doing. What are we supposed to do as the people of God? I want to suggest that it's pretty clear that you welcome the stranger, that you embrace the alien. You say, well, I can't afford it. There's a cost of living crisis. Don't you understand that it's really difficult for me? It's been difficult and it's hard and it's difficult to kind of cross the culture when you don't understand languages and what would I say and how do I do it? Yeah, there's some of those are real. But what's more real is the unity that you will have with that brother or sister in Christ. And in Christ, you will be able to find a way to connect. I remember spending 2 hours with an Iranian couple who had not long come to the UK. This was about 8-9 years ago. They didn't speak English, and we weren't very good at Farsi. We laughed for 2 hours. No idea what was going on. Not a clue. But boy, was it funny. And we were just trying our very best to communicate. And we never saw them again. Probably we offended them. No, we did. We saw them again. And somewhere along the line, there was a connection at a deeper level. And we shared our table. And whenever we did see them from then on, there was a deeper connection and bond. I went and spoke to them by name. They spoke to me. They asked about my family. And as their English improved, it got better and better and better. If we don't open up our hearts and we don't open up our tables, then nothing will change. Perhaps we say, look, there's not enough to go around in my house. I say that God's the God who provides. I think he's big enough. Corrie ten Boom and Betsy ten Boom were Christians who lived in the Netherlands during the Second World War. They hid Jews in their home to protect them from the Nazis. When they were discovered, not only were the Jews taken to the concentration camp, but Corrie and Betsy were also taken as well and spent the rest of the war there. Corrie said, "This is the pit of hell." And Betsy replied to her, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper." Doesn't matter how difficult, God's love is underneath you. You can drop into his arms of love and he'll catch you and support you when you put others before yourself and as we care for one another. That's the family I want to be part of. How about you? He is our refuge and his everlasting arms are underneath us, Deuteronomy says. So allow him to do it. Now, if you just scope over to chapter 22 for a moment and look at verses 1 to 5. I'll just read a few of these verses out. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress, or in debt, or discontented, gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. David's being chased. He has to leave the palace of the king because he's going to get killed. He actually then goes to the palace of his enemies, but that's another story for another time. And then he ends up in this cave, the Adullam's cave. He's been on his own, and now he's beginning to, his want and his need is beginning to be understood, and people are attracted to him in his brokenness. What do you mean? What are you even talking about, Alad? What I'm talking about here, folks, is that David was able to retreat and run for his life and find a safe place in the, it's a cliff top, kind of big cliff face, and there's this cave in there, and he fills this cave, and he's still on the run, and people start to come to him. It's amazing to me that when we're in the valley, that the strangest and most unexpected people come and give us comfort. When Helen was sick, my first wife Helen, and when she went on to die, the people who supported me were really interesting. It was very different to what perhaps you might expect. There was the neighbors. There was the people who were part of her workplace. There were people who were my son's friends' family. The way that love was poured out came in ways that I could never have anticipated. When David was at his lowest, what might have been perhaps one of the most darkest moments of his life, God comes through. God comes through. And it was through pain that David really understood God's provision. When these arrivals arrived at that cave, David was overwhelmed. I had friends. An old friend came from the south of England just to spend the day with me. And we just walked, and we had a coffee, and then we went to the post office, and then we picked up some food, and there was no agenda, and there was no rush. He was hospitable to me. He made space in his life for me. I wasn't an appointment between 1 and 2. And that's the difference between being a functional church and a family. Functional church. It's all about time and system and process. And you've got to have appointments. I get that. I do. But it should be a little less formal. What we're after is family. We are able to spend a bit of time, talk together, meet together, know enough about each other to be comfortable. So what's the deal with the bread? The deal with the bread is to say, there's a place at the table here for people who are hurting. There's a place at this table for each of you. There's a place at the table for wherever you've come from. There's a place, and if the table signifies at this point this church, there's a place for you here. We want to receive you and welcome you and say, come and be part of building this family with us. Come and join in with what God's doing. Because we want to not just be ones who give to you, we want to receive what you are giving and what God has gifted you in. It's a two-way street. I'm so thrilled. You know, Les there on the back, just give me a wave. Les is from Hong Kong. He's on the PA, and he's kind of sorting it all out. just tremendous servants. These folks from Hong Kong are serving like you cannot imagine. They are integrating their lives all the way in and saying, this is our home. And they're here for keeps. God is doing a great thing amongst us. But they're not just being nice so that they can prop up what we already do. The idea is that God has sent them to us so that we can look more like heaven on earth. That's the plan. God is answering our prayers by bringing people from all around the world at the moment, and I am thrilled. And we are thrilled. And we're saying hallelujah, because we want the richness of the nations. We want the richness of culture to impact our life as a community of people, so that actually we can own what God's doing and then incarnate it down our road and in our neighborhoods and in our communities, and we will become a home of refuge, perhaps. Maybe your family will be a family of refuge. Maybe your front door, maybe your table will be known as one that's open to the stranger and the alien. And that sounds like Christianity to me. The problem, of course, is also that many of us have sat round tables like that, and we've lived like that, and we've enjoyed our life like that, and we've been in fellowship like that, and the fellowship has broken down. The story that we're looking at the moment, the prodigal son, has been loaded with pain and struggle. The empty chair. Every day that prodigal father would look at the chair after his younger son had gone, and there was a seat set probably for his older son, and a seat set for him, and a seat set for the younger son, and then the younger son wasn't there anymore. When Jesus was at the Last Supper, there's this betrayal in the middle of the Last Supper. It is a risk. It is a risk to open up your heart. It is a risk to open up your home, because the potential is that you might get hurt, because somebody who's been close to you may just let you down. And that pain is real. But what do we do? Do we live in fear of the empty chair? Or do you risk and love and live well and invite people into the midst of fellowship? I think that despite different times in my life where there has been separation or pain or struggle in relationships, I'm not pulling back, because the benefits of said relationships over many, many years is still worth every single second. And the relationship that we're inviting you into, that we want you to start inviting other people into, is one that will last. It's one that will keep, if you're willing. So when I think about table, I think about family. And when I think about family, I think about love. And when I think about love, I think about God. Love God and love your neighbor. That's the invitation for us today. Amen.